Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about using the ViewPager with an async task in order to load some data in a background thread and then show it to the UI. In this case we're going to be inside of a TextView. To do that, we are going to take a look at a sample application that I've created here. It's called Math Fact Cards, and you can find the source code for this at github.com/foamyguy/mathfactcards. So I definitely recommend you come here and download this code, because this is what we're going to be working with throughout the video today. This sample application is a real simple one. Basically, it's a view pager, so that means we're going to be swiping some pages side by side in order to load up different data on each page, and the data that we're going to use today is going to come from numbersapi.com, which we got pulled up over here. This is basically just a simple website that will return to you a fact about some number, as long as you give it the number that you want inside the URL, like this here. So this would give you a fact about number 42. Because it has /42 here, you can put in any other number and it will return to you a fact about those numbers. So that's the API we're going to use to fill in facts inside of our pages in the view pager. So first thing is kind of what's a view pager. We'll take a look at that here. View pager in the documents, you'll notice it's part of the Android support, which means it's part of the support library, which means that if you are targeting an early enough API level, you have to include the support jar within your project, and we will go over how to do that here in a minute. But first, let's figure out here, kind of get a better idea of what a view pager is. And to do that, you can come to this page, read about it. It works in conjunction with fragments, but we're not going to cover fragments today. But it does work with those as well. It's basically just a parent view or an adapter view that lets you swipe through different pages of content. So like right here we have a screenshot of what we're going to end up with, and if this were on a phone, you could drag and swipe to see the next page, or drag and swipe the other way to see the previous page. In order to load up the data, we want to make sure that we're doing our loading in the background. Otherwise, when you go to swipe, if you swipe too fast before it has data loaded, the screen will freeze because you're working on the same thread that the screen is drawing from. So in order to do that today, we're going to use AsyncTask. AsyncTask is a cool object that basically abstracts away the use of the thread class and the handler class, and it gives you the same functionality that you could get out of these two, but it gives it to you inside of a couple easy to use methods here, like DoInBackground and onProgressUpdate and onPostExecute. We'll take a little bit more of a look at this once we see the example we're working with, but this is what we're going to use to load the data, is AsyncTask. Another thing we're going to cover in this tutorial is about 9patch drawables, which are an interesting type of resource that you're allowed to use. You can use a PNG file, and you use this special Draw9patch tool, which is located within the tools directory inside your SDK. So we'll open that up here. We see we got Android SDK and then tools, and inside there is this file called Draw9patch. This is the program we're going to use to create 9patch drawables. There's a bunch of other really cool stuff inside this tools folder. So I do recommend to you, if you never looked through some of this stuff, check it out. There's also some cool ones inside platform tools. Check those out. Definitely you can learn a lot about the platform, and lots of good stuff inside here for kind of troubleshooting different things within your application, like TraceView and hierarchy viewer and all these kinds of things. They're very good stuff, but right now we're going to use Draw9patch. So a 9patch drawable is it's basically just a PNG file with these extra lines or dots on the four edges. The very most outside pixel has these extra black lines in here, and basically this is telling the Android system which part of the picture it's going to be allowed to expand and which part of the picture it's going to put content into. So the left and top are stretchable areas. Anywhere where you put a black pixel along the top, it's going to allow this PNG file to stretch in that place. So if it needs to get bigger to fit the content that you put inside of it, it's going to copy kind of this whole vertical chunk here until it gets to a big enough size that it can hold what you're trying to put into it. Same thing for the left side. Whatever you put a black pixel on, it's going to use that space to grow whenever it needs to get bigger to fill content inside. The right side and the bottom side are for padding, and basically that is you're telling the system where it's allowed to put content inside here. So in this example here, you can see that we got dotted lines drawn over. Inside this box is where the content would be allowed to go. It wouldn't fit anywhere outside this area, only inside the box. So this shape would grow to as big as it needs to be to fit whatever you got inside of it into this box. So if it's like text, it would be words or something, it would grow, probably have to grow horizontally a little bit, and depending on how big your text size is, it might have to grow vertically a little bit, but it's going to grow enough so that the text will fit inside this box, and these paddings outside here remain with nothing on them. So that's kind of a quick overview of Draw9patch, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the source code here inside of Eclipse. If you download that project from GitHub and import it into your Eclipse, you should have this. I've got mine imported here. It's called Fun Times. Feel free to call it whatever you want, but that's what I call mine. So we've got a couple of different Java classes here, 4 of them. We've got Fetch Fact Task, Fun Pager Adapter, and Main Activity, and then util.java. We're going to talk about all those, but let's start first with the support library. So since we're using ViewPager, and ViewPager is part of the support library, if you're not using a new enough version of the platform, which you can see here, we're targeting platform number 4, minimum SDK number 4, so we have to add the support jar in order to get ViewPager access on that platform. If you got a new enough version of Eclipse, it will generate this libs folder for you whenever you make a new project, and it will put this support jar inside of it for you. But if you have an older version of Eclipse, then you got to go online, download this file from the developer website, make yourself a libs folder, post it inside there, and then the last thing you got to do is right click your project, choose properties, choose Java build path over here, and then choose the libraries tab. And if you don't have it in this list already, then you click add external jars. You'll navigate to your libs folder that's inside this project. You'll select Android Support v4 and you'll hit open, and that will put it inside this list of used libraries for you. So then we'll click OK. Now that we got that in, we're allowed to use the ViewPager. Let's check out our layouts here. We got 2 different layout files. One of them is activity main and one of them is page fun. So activity main is going to be a layout that represents our activity, and page fun is going to be a layout that represents a single page within our ViewPager. So inside activity main, it's pretty basic. We got just a relative layout and a ViewPager. Now you'll notice instead of just being called ViewPager, we have to put this full package name in front of it here, and that's because it's technically not included with the platform, and since we're pulling it out of this jar file, it's kind of a custom view. So just like if you were to make your own custom version of a regular view, like a text view, let's say you make your own custom version, you'd have to put your own package in here. Since we're pulling this one out of the support jar, we got to put the support jar package name in here. So we got android.support.v4.view.viewPager, and that's the type of view we're using, and that is the only thing inside of our activity main layout, and we got height and width both set to match parent, so it's going to be full size. That's the only thing inside activity main. Let's check out the page. It's also pretty basic. We got a relative layout, and then inside of that a text view that's going to hold the text for that specific page. And I defaulted the text here to loading, so that's why you'll see here in a minute when we demonstrate this application that it will say loading before it gets the text back from the API. That way we let the user know, hey, we are loading something in here. A different way you might want to do this is with a progress indicator perhaps, but in this case I just got this text in here to let them know that they're loading. And you can see I just hard-coded this string. I didn't put it in the strings file, so I got a little lint warning there that says I should use a string resource, and we could break that out later if we want to. So that's the only thing we got inside of a page. Let's check out the manifest just real quick. We got all the basic stuff inside here. Activity with main launcher. We only got one activity in this application, and it's main activity. We do need the internet permission because we're going to be pulling this stuff from that online numbersapi.com. So without the internet we can't reach that. And then we got minimum SDK version is 4, like I mentioned before. So that's good for the manifest. Let's start checking out these Java files. Real quick one, let's get it out of the way first, is util Java. This is something I use like to make logging a little bit easier. So basically I make this class here, it's got a static log tag, so I got my log tag for the whole project here, and then I got a boolean that says debugging is equal to true or false, and right now we got it set to true. And then the only other thing inside here is a static log method that takes a string, and it just checks our debugging flag, and if that's true, then it will log for us in the info channel. I use this class just because it's a little bit easier if you got a bunch of different activities in a bunch of different places, which we don't here, but once you do, this makes it easier because your log tag is always in the same place. You never have to go hunting around for different copies of that, and you can really quickly turn off your logging for the whole project right here just by changing this boolean, as long as you make sure to always use this util.log. So that's what we got inside there. We got a main activity. So let's check that out real quick first. Not a whole lot going on inside here. It's basically we get our reference to the ViewPager, which is back in our layout right here. We're going to get the reference to that with find view by ID, and then we make a new FunPager adapter, and we set the adapter on our ViewPager that we just pulled out. So FunPager adapter, what is that? That is the object that we're creating over here, FunPagerAdapter.java. That is going to be our customized adapter that will load data into the ViewPager for us. So let's dig into that next. So FunPager Adapter, it extends, you can see it extends type pager adapter, which is basically the basic adapter, and you have to make your own adapter and extend from there in order to get it to do whatever it is you want. But pager adapter has lots of methods and things that we need to override that will make our adapter act in the way we want. So let's see what we got here. We got some int array of colors, and these are just some hex values. This is so we can have different colors. I think they're chosen at random for each page. So that's just, we got these for reference so that we can set the background of the page to a random color. Random, that's what we need that for as well, is to get the background color. And that's all we have as far as declarations. So let's jump into the constructor here. We made our own NoParameter Constructor. We just call super, and we initialize random, and that's it. And we're gonna override getCount, and getCount is a method of pager adapter, so that's why we're allowed to override it here. And we're gonna have it return integer.maxValue, so it's going to return the biggest integer possible. So basically why we're doing this is so that we can always keep swiping to the left until we hit the maximum value of integer. And we did that because this numbers API, it will keep returning numbers to you for even for really big numbers. So we want to make it so that if we do happen to swipe all the way over there, we can still keep going, because we don't want to set some kind of arbitrary cap on the number of pages that we have. So we set that to max value. Is view from object, that is something that comes from pager adapter. So as soon as you do extends pager adapter and you do all your imports, you should get maybe like some warning text that pops up, and if you fix that by clicking on it and clicking include inherited methods or something like that. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's something like that on the warning. If you do that, it will populate some of these methods for you, and this is one of them. So you don't have to touch it if you let Eclipse generate for you. But if you are typing this out by hand, this is a method that is required for pager adapter to work, and it's basically it checks to know whether a view is from a data object or not. So I won't go into too much details about what that means, but just know that you do have to have this in order for it to work, and that Eclipse will auto-generate it for you if you let it. So the next thing we got here, this is the most important method inside of our adapter. It's called InstantiateItem, and it returns an object. We're going to go ahead and override that too. So that means there is a default one inside pager adapter, but we want to override it so that we do our own things. So InstantiateItem, we got a couple parameters here, view collection and int position. So collection is going to return to us the ViewPager itself, I believe, in case we need that reference for anything. And then the position is what page we're on. So whether we're on page 0 or page 1 or page 10 or whatever, that's going to tell us what page we're on. So what we want to do is get a layout inflator so that we can inflate our card layout. So we will get a reference to that with get system service, and we pass it the layout inflator service. And you'll notice get system service, that's a method of the context class, so in order to call it we need to have a context, but since we got this view collection passed to us up here, a view actually has a get context method, so we can say collection.getContext. That will get our context for us that we can then call get system service on. So we call that, we get our inflator out of here. We're going to use that in just a second. On this next line we got view page, so this is going to be a view that represents a single page within our pager, and we say inflator.inflate r.layout.pagefun, and we pass null. This is an optional parameter here. The second one, you could pass it a view reference if you already have a reference to the view that you want to be the root layout inside here. We don't have that this time, so we're going to pass null to it, and we're going to tell it r.layout.pagefun is the layout we want to inflate. And if you'll remember, that's this one back here. It's got a relative layout and a text view in it, and that's it. So we inflate that, we put it inside view page. We got relative layout back is the relative layout right here that's inside of our page. We're going to use find view by ID, and notice we do have to call page.findView by ID instead of just find view by ID, because we're not inside of an activity here. So we have to call that on the page view in order to get back the relative layout correctly. So we say page.findView by ID r.id.background, and that is our relative layout. We need a reference to that so that we can change the color to it, which is what we're going to do right now. We got int random color equals rnd.nextInt5. So basically what we're doing is we got 5 different colors in our array up here, and we want to pick one of them at random, so we use this rnd.nextInt to get an integer for that. So once we have that random color, we can go on. We get TextView TV equals, again, page.findView by ID r.id.label text, which is, of course, the text view that's inside of our PageFun layout. So we got that text view now. We're going to need that in order to set the text that we get back from the API, numbers API to it. So first thing we do is we say tv.setBackgroundResource r.drawable.generic_back. So generic back is a 9-patch PNG file that we have saved in here. It's in drawable HDPI, and it's called right there generic_back.9.png. That .9, that's how you know it's supposed to be a 9-patch. So you can see it's just a regular PNG file that's been renamed with this .9, and the Draw9patch program will take care of that for us. You can see in this one we got a dot here and a dot here. That's going to be where our view is going to grow, and then we also got some over on the right and the bottom here for content, which is going to say the text can be anywhere inside these lines. As long as if we were to extend these lines out, as long as the text is inside the box that would make, then it's good to go. So let's talk just for a second about 9-patches, since we're using one right now. We're going to take a little bit of a sidetrack here. This is the Draw9patch program, and remember, you find this inside of Android SDK, Tools, and then you run draw9patch.bat. That will open up this file for you, this program here, and from there you can drag and drop your regular PNG file. So initially I had a PNG file that was just this square card thing, and you can see kind of in this picture that the background shows through. That's because this card, that PNG that I'm working with, is partly transparent. So I started with just this and some transparent pixels around it. I dropped it into this Draw9patch program, and this is what we get. So from here we got to draw these black pixels along the left, top, and right and bottom sides to represent where our view is going to be able to grow in order to fit the content into it. So there's this program is pretty simple, pretty straightforward how it works. The controls are down here that show you some of the different settings. There's not very many of them. Show lock, show content, and show patches. I usually turn all of those on, and sometimes I have to back my zoom out because it starts really far zoomed in, which is good if you're trying to get in there and count pixels, but if you want to see a good overall view of what your thing is looking like, you got to zoom out a little ways. So that's the editor is on the left side. In order to add your points, you basically put your mouse over here on one of the edges and you left click to add a point and right click to erase a point. So I've already done that here. The other thing that's included inside Draw9patch is this preview pane over here, and this will show you a live preview of what your PNG will look like if it gets stretched with content of various sizes. So this is if it's got content that's very large vertically. It will show you how it's going to stretch out. So we can see it stretches pretty good here. This blue rectangle represents the content, where the content would be allowed to go. So whatever we put inside this, if we set this as a background to a layout, whatever we put inside the layout only will fall within this blue rectangle here. Then we can scroll down and see some others. The next one is basically the same idea but stretch horizontally instead of vertically, and then the last one here is stretch vertically and horizontally, and we get to see, yeah, we got a big blue square here. That's where our content would go, and everything still looks good. So once you're happy with these kind of previews over here, you can save with File, Save, 9patch, and you want to save that inside of one of your drawable folders. So we've got that one here in Drawable HDPI. So coming back to this, we're setting our TextView to be the background of that 9patch file. So what that means in regards to content is, since we're a TextView, the text will go only inside this blue box here. If it has to grow in order to make room, which it's going to have to, then it will make sure that the text stays within this blue boundary here, if you can imagine that inside the phone. So set background, generic back, we're doing that. And then we got back, which is our relative layout, dot set background color, and then colors, array, and a random color for which item in the array we're going to get. So we got that random color int up here. This is how we're setting it to a random color for each page. The next thing that we do is actually get our data to fill in. So we say fetch fact task equals new fetch fact task, and we pass it TV, which is our text view. We're passing it that in the constructor, which that's something we set up, and we'll see that here in a second to kind of tie these two together. But we're passing it the TV so that after it gets the data, it can set it into that text view for us. After we get our fetch fact task object, we say .execute, and we give it a URL here, which is also something that we specified. We'll see how to do that here in a second. For now, just notice that we're giving it numbersapi.com / and then the position of the page we're at. So if we're on page number 0 and we get this position up here where it calls InstantiateItem, it will pass us this position. So if we're on page 0, this is going to get substituted in with 0. If we're on page 10, it will be 10, so on and so forth. So we call execute, and that is going to, this task here, fetch fact task, is going to handle everything else for us. It's going to pull the text down from the API, and it's going to set it inside this text view that we gave to it with the constructor. So let's take a look at how that works. Inside here, we got fetch fact task extends AsyncTask, which AsyncTask, back here, if you check out the developer page for it, you can learn more kind of about it and how it works and how you're supposed to use it and all that fun stuff. This is one example of how to use it, but this is a very powerful object. You can use it lots of different ways. This is definitely just one of them. So you'll notice it does have some generics here. We got 3 of them to fill in, and for this example we filled in string. This first one is the input. The second one we put in void, and that is the units for progress. So like if you wanted to have a progress bar that counted up the time until you were done, you probably would put int or something like that in here for a percentage. But we're not going to have any progress this time, so we're going to leave it with void. And then the last one is output, and we're going to call that string also. So the way we're going to use these is the input is going to be our URL, and then the output is going to be the text that we got back from the Numbers API website. So inside here we declare a text view, and this is going to be the text view that we put our result text into once we get it back. So we declare this, and then we're going to make our own constructor here, and we're going to accept the text view, and all we're going to do is just set outText equals to the text view that we get in from the parameter. So if we jump back to this page, we got TV inside this constructor parameter here. So TV is going to get set to outText, so that basically once we're done fetching these words, we're going to set it to outText and it will show up on the screen for us. The first major method of AsyncTask, and the one that we're going to use here first, is DoInBackground. So basically anything that you put inside this method, AsyncTask will run it in a background thread for you, which means it's not going to be on the same thread as the UI, which means that even if it's kind of a heavy-duty task, which getting stuff from the internet is, even though we're getting a small amount of data here, it's still considered a pretty heavy task. So we want to do that in the background so that the UI doesn't get all choppy. So that's exactly what we're going to do here, is pull some data from the internet. You'll see we got string and ... URI. These are the input parameters. So whatever you pass to the execute method, so you can see in the execute method here we passed a string which is numbersapi.com/ and then the position of the current page. We passed that string in here to execute. That's going to get passed on to this DoInBackground method. And the reason it's got ... here is because this is actually like an array, and you're allowed to put in multiple inputs if you want to. For this example, we only used one of them, but you are allowed to use multiples. So this is our input. We'll store that just for a second here. We got what we need in order to pull this stuff from the internet. We need a HTTP client, so we will get that default HTTP client. We need a response to represent what we got back from the server, and then we got a response string, which is going to be the string of the content that we got back from the server. So we got to have a TryCatch block because we're working with the internet and we don't know necessarily if the phone is online and if it has an active connection and all this stuff. So we got to have TryCatch to handle those potential exceptions, like if the phone doesn't have internet or something goes wrong. We want to catch that instead of just force closing. So we got this all inside of a TryCatch here. And what we're going to do, response, which is this response, HTTP response we declared up here, equals HTTP client.execute, and then we're passing it a new HTTP GET object, and the parameter for that is URI0, which again, remember, that is the parameter that we got passed in to DoInBackground, which is the same one that we passed to .execute over here. So it's going to be the URL to the numbersapi.com. That's what we're HTTP GET. That's the URL that we're using. So we're going to get the response from that. We get the status line out of there, which is like 200 for OK or 404 for not found, that kind of thing. We're going to get our status line, and we're going to check to see if it was equal to status OK. If it was, we're going to continue on, and if it wasn't, then we're going to throw an IO exception, just so that we kind of pass up the chain a little bit and let somebody else know, hey, there was an error. We didn't get a 200 response, so something went wrong. We didn't get what we wanted from the server. But if we did get an OK response, we're going to make a byte output stream, and we are going to call response.getEntity.WriteToOut. That's going to write the content of the response to this output stream, and then from there what we're going to do is say response string equals out.toString. So basically this is all just kind of some fancy objects and methods, but basically what we're doing here is we're getting the text that our numbers API back from this page here returns to us. So for instance, numbers API /42, it returns to this text. This is the text here. We're going to be reading it through this output stream and into the response string variable. We're reading that from there. So, and I said else already, if we did get a problem, we didn't get HTTP 200 response, then we're just going to throw the IO exception up further. So that's about it. And then the last thing we have to do is return response string, which is the string we got back from the web. So we return that, and then we're done with DoInBackground. So now we come down here, the next method that we override is onPostExecute, and it gets a parameter string result. So, and we get to pick this type. Remember, since this is, we made this string up here when we declared this string as the third generic inside of our extends command up here. We got string here, so because we put the string here, that's the same type that we get returned to us. So onPostExecute is going to get called by the async task, and it's going to basically, as a parameter, it's going to put this response string that we return from DoInBackground. So when this gets called, it's going to have the text that we got back from the server. And the only thing we're going to do inside here, we call super.onPostExecute, just in case the standard async task needs to do anything important. It's always good habit to chain your methods to your superclass if you're going to be overriding them, just to make sure if the superclass has something that it needs to get done. So we do that, and then the only other thing we do is outText.setText result. So that is where we're actually setting the text that we got back from the server to our text view that's inside of our page. And that text view again is here. We passed it in with the constructor parameter. That's how come the fetch fact task has access to that text view, is because we passed it in with the constructor. So back inside the pager here, the last thing that we have to do after we start our or after we execute our task, the very last thing we have to do is this little funky line here, and you see it's got some weird casting on the front of it here for collection, but basically since collection comes to us as just a generic view object, we need to cast it to a ViewPager in order to call this AddView method. And that's because a view object, like what collection starts out as, doesn't have an AddView method, but a ViewPager object does. So we cast it to ViewPager because we know that's what it is, and then we call AddView and we add the page that we've been working on. So this is the same page that we inflated. We from that page we got the background, we set the color on it, and also from that page we got the text view and we set the text in it with the fetch fact task. This other parameter over here is an index. So that's saying where do we want to add this view. Basically, we can add it at the front index 0. That's where we want to add it now, but if you wanted to put it later on in the stack, you could. For now, we're just going to leave that to 0, and then the very last thing we do is return our page object. So that's it for InstantiateItem, and again, that's the most important method in this adapter. This is a method essentially that's like the glue between our data source, which is our numbers API, and our UI, which is the colorful cards that are going to show up on the screen. If you've used list view before with list view adapters like array adapter or cursor adapter, InstantiateItem is a very similar concept to the getView method that's inside those other types of adapters, but in this one they call it InstantiateItem. The very last thing we need down here is a DestroyItem method, and this is another one that Eclipse will auto-generate for you. If you use the quick fixes on the warning, it will generate this method for you. Basically, this is something you have to have that will call remove view on a view when it's ready to destroy it. This is so the system can release any resources related to that view, so we don't run out of memory or anything bad like that. We got to have this destroy item method in here, and it will generate it for us, which is what I did, but you're also welcome, obviously, to type it in yourself. So that's everything for our adapter, and that is also everything that makes up this project here. So we'll come back real quick just to main activity so we can kind of tie around back into that. And you'll remember we had ViewPager that we found from our layout. We made an instance of our FunPager adapter, and then from there all we had to do was set the adapter on the ViewPager, and this adapter and this fetch fact task will take care of the rest for us. This is all we have to do is set the adapter on our pager. So now let's check out how it works. Got the emulator pulled up here. We will run fun times, and you can see as we started out on number 3, so I had this running before and didn't finish it, but if we hit the back button here, start it again, we'll start out on 0 this time. And you can see it says loading in the middle of the screen there before it pulled in this text. That's from the default text that we set inside PageFun layout file. So you see 0 is the coldest possible temperature on the Kelvin scale. That's the fact for number 0. You can see if we swipe over to number 1, we get the fact for number 1, 2, and 3, and so on and so forth, all the way till max integer. We could swipe this as much as we want until we got all the way over there. And we would get a new page for each side. An interesting thing to note about this adapter, by default, the pager adapter that we extended here, by default, that creates one page ahead of where we're at. So we're on page 8 right now. Over here where page 9's at, it already has created the page, which means as soon as we swipe it onto the screen, it's already going to have text filled in because it's already reached out to the Numbers API, already got a response back, and already filled it into a text view and everything. It's got everything already ready to go for this next page. And that's useful because it kind of helps the user by not making them wait around as much. We load one extra page since we kind of assume they're going to swipe at least once. So we load that extra page over here by default. So if we swipe, you can see 9 is already filled in. And whereas if I swipe 2 times really quick, the second time you should see loading in here because it didn't have a chance to load that page up quite. So I swiped 2 times quick there, and it took it just a hair, just a second to load that text in. And that behavior comes from the default pager adapter. It does that for us. So that's it for this tutorial. This is the math fact trivia that's on GitHub. Again, you can find the source code that you need, or math fact cards rather, not math fact trivia, math fact cards, and the source code is github.com/foamyguy/mathfactcards. You can get the source code, check it out, and use it for whatever you want. You can adapt it to your own API, or you can adapt it with your own layouts. You can do whatever you want with it. Just download it from here and you can use that code, follow along with this tutorial, and I hope that that gives you a better understanding of both ViewPager and AsyncTask, and also a little bit intro into the Draw9patch tool and 9patch drawables overall. So that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time, guys.